At Henderson's motor auction, seasoned bikers gathered around chrome-polished Harleys and sleek racing machines worth thousands. In the back corner sat a rusted 1973 Honda CB350, its faded blue paint chipped and engine caked with decades of neglect. When 70-year-old Frank Morrison raised his weathered hand to bid, the crowd erupted in laughter. This machine hadn't run in 20 years, and everyone knew it. Frank ignored their snickers, placing his final bid with the quiet confidence of a man who understood something they didn't. The auctioneer's gavel fell, and whispers spread through the crowd about the crazy old fool who just wasted his money on scrap metal. But Frank simply walked to his purchase, pulled a worn key from his leather vest, and slipped it into the ignition. What secret did this forgotten motorcycle hold that could silence an entire room of hardened bikers? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Henderson's motor auction yard, where the scent of motor oil and leather mingled with the crisp autumn air. Rows of motorcycles gleamed under the makeshift spotlights, each machine representing someone's dream or financial necessity. The crowd had been gathering since dawn, a mix of serious collectors, weekend warriors, and curious onlookers drawn by the promise of rare finds and unexpected bargains. Frank Morrison stood at the edge of the assembly, his presence as understated as his faded denim jacket and well-worn boots. At 70, he carried himself with the careful dignity of a man who had learned to measure his steps, both literally and figuratively. His silver hair, pulled back in a neat ponytail, caught the morning light, and his hands, scarred from decades of mechanical work, rested calmly at his sides. Jim Henderson, the auctioneer, surveyed his domain with the satisfaction of a man who had built something lasting. His voice carried easily across the yard as he tested his microphone, the familiar cadence already drawing bidders closer to the main platform. Henderson had been running this auction for 35 years, and he could read a crowd like a favorite book. Today felt different, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. The serious bidders clustered near the front, their eyes already calculating values and margins. Among them, Marcus Steele Rodriguez commanded attention without trying. His leather vest displayed patches from motorcycle clubs across 3 states, and his crew of younger riders flanked him like an honor guard. Steele had earned his nickname not just from his preference for chrome and steel machines, but from his reputation for aggressive bidding and an uncompromising approach to motorcycle culture. Frank observed the dynamics with the patience of someone who had seen many auctions come and go. He noticed how the younger riders gravitated toward the flashiest machines, their conversations filled with talk of horsepower and brand prestige. It reminded him of his own youth, when the loudest bike often seemed the most appealing. Time had taught him different lessons about what truly mattered in a machine. Elena Vasquez moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a journalist who had covered everything from political rallies to county fairs. Her motorcycle magazine had sent her to document the auction, particularly interested in the vintage machines that were becoming increasingly rare at these events. She carried a small digital recorder and a well-worn notebook, tools that had served her through countless stories about the evolving world of motorcycle culture. The preview period allowed potential bidders to examine the machines up close, and Frank took his time walking among them. His trained eye caught details. Others missed the quality of a restoration, the authenticity of parts, the subtle signs that revealed a machine's true history. He paused at several bikes, running his fingers along fuel tanks and examining engine components with the familiarity of someone who had spent a lifetime understanding how these machines worked. Steele's crew followed their leader from bike to bike, their commentary loud enough for others to hear. They spoke in the language of modern performance metrics, comparing acceleration times and top speeds with the casual authority of those who believed newer always meant better. Their confidence was infectious, drawing other bidders into their orbit and establishing them as the day's dominant force. Henderson watched Frank's methodical examination with interest. The old mechanic's reputation preceded him in these circles, though Frank himself never spoke of his past accomplishments. There were stories, of course, whispered tales of legendary builds and racing victories that seemed to belong to another era. But Frank Morrison had always let his work speak for itself, and these days his work was mostly silent. The morning progressed with the ritual efficiency of a well-run auction. Henderson's assistants arranged the bidding order, while vendors sold coffee and breakfast sandwiches to the growing crowd. The atmosphere carried the anticipation that made these events special, the sense that anything might happen, that someone's treasure could become another's triumph. Frank's leather vest, worn smooth by 40 years of riding, bore the subtle marks of a life lived on two wheels. The patches were fewer and more meaningful than those displayed by younger riders, each one representing a significant journey or achievement rather than mere decoration. His hands moved automatically to check the inner pocket where he kept the things that mattered most, a habit formed by decades of careful attention to detail. As the preview time wound down and Henderson prepared to begin the official bidding, Frank took one last look around the yard. His eyes settled on a particular machine tucked away in the back corner, partially hidden by more prominent displays. A slight smile crossed his weathered features, the first expression of genuine emotion he had shown all morning. Frank Morrison's story began long before this autumn morning, in a small garage behind his childhood home, where his father first taught him the sacred relationship between man and machine. Those early lessons had shaped everything that followed, the understanding that motorcycles were more than mere transportation, that they carried the dreams and memories of everyone who rode them. The photograph in his wallet, creased from years of handling, showed a younger Frank standing beside a beautiful woman with dark hair and laughing eyes. Sarah had been 23 when they met at a motorcycle rally in 1974, her presence transforming his world from black and white to vivid color. She had approached him not because of his racing reputation, but because she noticed how gently he treated an injured sparrow he found near the paddock. Their courtship unfolded on winding mountain roads and desert highways, Sarah riding behind him on his custom-built machines. She learned to read the rhythm of the engine, to lean into curves with perfect trust, to find the meditation that came with miles of shared silence. Those rides became the foundation of their marriage, a wordless communication that sustained them through 43 years together. Morrison Custom Motorcycles had grown from Frank's reputation as a builder who could coax life from the most hopeless machines. His shop occupied a converted warehouse on the edge of town, its walls lined with tools that had been handed down through generations of mechanics. Frank's approach differed from the flashy custom shops that dominated motorcycle magazines. He built for soul rather than show, creating machines that reflected their riders' deepest needs rather than their surface desires. Sarah had been his business partner in everything but title, her intuitive understanding of people perfectly complementing his mechanical genius. She handled the customers who came seeking something they couldn't quite articulate, translating their emotional needs into specifications Frank could build. Together they created motorcycles that became extensions of their owners' identities, machines that grew more beautiful with age and use rather than less. The cancer had taken her slowly, giving them time to say everything that needed saying while gradually stealing her strength. Frank had spent those final months learning to see their shared life through her eyes, understanding how much of his identity had been shaped by her love and faith in his gifts. She died on a Tuesday morning in spring, holding his hand while birds sang outside their bedroom window. David Morrison had inherited his mother's intelligence, but none of his father's passion for mechanical things. Frank's relationship with his son had grown complicated over the years, especially after David chose corporate law over the family business. The distance between them represented more than geography, it was the gap between two completely different ways of understanding what made life meaningful. After Sarah's death, Frank had gradually withdrawn from the riding community that had sustained him for decades. The shop remained open, but he took fewer custom orders and spent more time on routine maintenance work that required less emotional investment. His regular customers noticed the change, but respected his grief too much to comment directly. The fire that had driven his legendary builds seemed to have dimmed to barely glowing embers. The morning visits to Sarah's grave had become Frank's new ritual, replacing the dawn rides they had shared for so many years. He would sit beside her headstone and tell her about the day ahead, about the customers who still sought his help, about the projects gathering dust in his shop. Sometimes he imagined her responses, her voice as clear in memory as it had been in life. Depression had settled over Frank like a heavy blanket, muffling the joy he had once found in simple mechanical challenges. Friends from the riding community tried to draw him back into their circle, inviting him to rallies and poker runs, but Frank politely declined most social gatherings. The sight of couples riding together was too painful, reminding him of everything he had lost. His reputation in the motorcycle world remained intact despite his withdrawal. Younger mechanics still sought his advice on difficult builds, and collectors occasionally approached him about rare machines that needed his particular expertise. Frank helped when he could, but his heart wasn't fully engaged in the work that had once consumed him with passionate intensity. The house Frank and Sarah had shared for 30 years felt too large and too quiet without her presence. He had considered selling it several times, but couldn't bring himself to pack away the life they had built together. Her reading chair remained exactly as she had left it, her motorcycle magazines still stacked on the side table where she had placed them during her final illness. Elena's research into Frank's background would have revealed a racing career that spanned 2 decades, multiple championship wins, and a reputation for riding impossible machines to victory. But Frank himself rarely spoke of those achievements, considering them secondary to the deeper satisfaction he had found in building and sharing his life with Sarah. Steele Rodriguez commanded respect through presence alone, his 6-foot frame carrying the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. At 45, he represented the new generation of motorcycle enthusiasts who measured success in chrome polish and engine displacement. His Harley-Davidson Road King, parked prominently near the auction entrance, showcased every available upgrade and custom accessory the factory offered. The younger riders who followed Steele shared his appreciation for machines that announced their arrival from blocks away. Their conversations centered on horsepower figures and quarter-mile times, statistical comparisons that reduced motorcycles to mathematical equations. They spoke the language of modern performance, where engineering specifications mattered more than the intangible qualities that made a machine memorable. Steele's chrome-plated keychain caught the morning light as he gestured toward the premium motorcycles scheduled for early bidding. Each key represented a different machine in his collection, trophies that demonstrated his financial success and commitment to the lifestyle. His garage housed 12 motorcycles, each one meticulously maintained and rarely ridden more than necessary to keep them operational. The generational divide in motorcycle culture had been growing for years, creating subtle tensions that played out at events like Henderson's auction. Older riders like Frank remembered when motorcycles were primarily tools for transportation and exploration, machines that earned character through use and accumulated stories through miles. The newer enthusiasts often treated their bikes more like rolling sculpture, impressive to look at, but too valuable to risk on adventures that might leave scratches. Elena observed these dynamics with the trained eye of someone who had spent years documenting the evolving motorcycle community. Her articles explored how the culture was changing as disposable income increased and motorcycles became lifestyle accessories rather than necessities. The shift from function to form was reshaping everything from bike design to rally attendance, creating a market that favored appearance over performance. Henderson watched Steele's crew with mixed feelings. Their spending power kept his auction profitable, but their dismissive attitude toward older machines bothered him on a personal level. He had grown up around riders who respected any motorcycle that ran reliably, regardless of its age or appearance. The new generation's focus on brand prestige and visual impact seemed to miss something essential about what made motorcycles special. The premium bikes scheduled for early bidding represented everything modern motorcycle culture valued. A pristine Ducati Panigale drew admiring crowds with its aggressive styling and race-derived technology. A custom Harley-Davidson CVO featured enough chrome and painted flames to power a small city's electrical grid. Each machine competed for attention through increasingly elaborate displays of mechanical sophistication and artistic excess. Frank studied these machines with professional interest but personal detachment. He could appreciate the engineering quality and craftsmanship they represented, but they felt more like museum pieces than the living, breathing partners he had known throughout his riding career. The gap between cost and soul seemed to grow wider with each passing year, pricing out the very people who had built the culture these newer riders now claimed to represent. Steele's approach to bidding reflected his business background in construction management. He researched market values, set strict budget limits, and approached each purchase as an investment opportunity rather than an emotional decision. His success in acquiring desirable machines came from treating auctions like corporate negotiations, where preparation and financial resources typically determined outcomes. The younger riders surrounding Steele absorbed his lessons about motorcycle ownership as investment strategy. They discussed resale values and collectability factors with the same intensity their predecessors had once reserved for carburetor tuning and suspension setup. The shift from mechanical knowledge to market awareness represented a fundamental change in how people related to their machines. Elena's presence at the auction reflected the motorcycle media's growing focus on lifestyle content over technical information. Her magazine's readers wanted to know about the social aspects of motorcycle ownership, the events and personalities that defined contemporary riding culture. The actual mechanical details that Frank's generation considered essential had become secondary to the broader narrative of belonging to an exclusive community. Henderson's business model had adapted to serve both constituencies, offering premium machines for the high-end buyers while maintaining space for the older, more affordable bikes that drew traditional enthusiasts. The balance was delicate, requiring him to respect both groups while maximizing revenue from their different spending patterns. The contrast between Frank's worn leather vest and Steele's pristine riding gear symbolized the broader changes affecting motorcycle culture. Frank's patches told stories of actual journeys and experiences, while Steele's accessories represented participation in a commercial version of the same lifestyle. Both approaches had validity, but they pointed toward very different futures for the riding community. As the auction's start time approached, Frank noticed how the crowd naturally divided into distinct groups based on their interests and budgets. The serious collectors clustered around the rare vintage machines, while the lifestyle buyers gravitated toward the modern customs and factory specials. Somewhere between these extremes, the working riders examined the practical machines they might actually afford and use for daily transportation. Henderson's voice carried across the yard as he called for attention, his practiced cadence drawing the scattered crowd toward the auction platform. The morning's business began with the premium machines, each one generating spirited bidding wars that pushed prices well beyond their estimated values. Steele dominated the early rounds, claiming a restored Triumph Bonneville and a custom Harley Street Glide with the mechanical precision of someone conducting a familiar orchestra. The crowd's energy peaked during the bidding for the rare motorcycles, their enthusiasm infectious as collectors competed for machines that might never appear at auction again. Frank watched from his position near the back, occasionally nodding approval when particularly fine examples changed hands at fair prices. His presence went largely unnoticed by the younger bidders, who focused their attention on the celebrities and big spenders commanding the front rows. As the morning progressed, Henderson's assistants wheeled out the middle-tier machines, solid motorcycles that would serve their new owners well without generating headlines or magazine features. The bidding remained active but less frenzied, with working riders competing against small dealers for reliable transportation. Frank observed these exchanges with more interest, remembering when such machines had been the backbone of motorcycle culture. The transition to the auction's final section came with Henderson's apologetic explanation about the project bikes and restoration opportunities that concluded every sale. These machines attracted a different type of bidder, mechanically inclined optimists who saw potential where others saw problems. The crowd had thinned considerably by this point, with many of the morning's successful buyers loading their purchases for transport home. Elena remained to document the auction's complete story, her journalistic instincts telling her that interesting narratives often emerged from unexpected moments. She had noticed Frank's patient observation throughout the morning and sensed something significant about his presence that she couldn't yet articulate. Her camera remained ready as Henderson's crew struggled to push the rusted Honda CB 350 into position. The motorcycle looked even worse under direct sunlight, its faded blue paint job interrupted by patches of rust that told stories of decades spent outdoors. The cracked seat had been poorly repaired with electrical tape, and the chrome exhaust pipes bore the dull patina of long neglect. Most of the crowd barely glanced at the machine, their attention already shifting toward more promising lots or their plans for leaving the auction. Henderson's description was charitable but honest, acknowledging the Honda's rough condition while noting its completeness and potential value as a restoration project. His years of experience had taught him to present every machine in its best possible light, finding positive aspects even in the most challenging cases. The estimated value range, he announced, drew chuckles from the remaining bidders, who considered even the low end optimistic. Frank felt his heart rate increase as he reached for his bidding paddle, the simple action requiring more courage than any race he had ever entered. The crowd's reaction was immediate and unmistakable, scattered laughter that built to open amusement as other bidders realized someone was seriously considering the neglected Honda. Steele's crew was particularly vocal in their mockery, their comments carrying clearly across the diminished assembly. The bidding opened at $50, and Frank's raised paddle was the only response Henderson received. The auctioneer's surprised expression reflected the crowd's confusion as he attempted to generate additional interest in what appeared to be a hopeless machine. His standard encouragements fell flat as other potential bidders shook their heads or openly laughed at the suggestion that the Honda might be worth even minimal investment. Steele's voice cut through the murmurs as he loudly questioned Frank's sanity, his comments generating approving laughter from his followers. The mockery stung, but Frank maintained his composure with the dignity of someone who had endured worse criticism and survived. His paddle remained steady in the air as Henderson searched for competing bids that clearly weren't coming. Elena stepped closer, her camera documenting the unexpected drama as the crowd's amusement grew more pointed. She recognized the story potential in Frank's determined bidding, though she couldn't yet understand what motivated his interest in such an obviously worthless machine. Her recording captured the crowd's reactions as Henderson attempted to conduct a professional auction despite the unusual circumstances. The gavel's fall came after Henderson's required waiting period, officially transferring ownership of the Honda to Frank for the princely sum of $50. The crowd's reaction was immediate and unrestrained laughter, mixed with commentary about the foolishness of spending money on obvious junk. Steele's crew was particularly creative in their suggestions about Frank's mental state and mechanical knowledge. Frank accepted the ribbing with quiet grace, his expression revealing nothing of the emotions churning beneath his calm exterior. He approached Henderson's desk to complete the paperwork, his movements deliberate and unhurried despite the continued commentary from the crowd. The transaction felt surreal, like completing a ritual that had been waiting decades for its proper moment. Frank's walk across the auction yard felt like a journey through time, each step carrying him closer to a moment he had both dreaded and anticipated for 3 years. The crowd's laughter followed him, their voices creating a soundtrack of disbelief that seemed to echo off the surrounding buildings. He ignored their commentary with the practiced dignity of someone who had learned that other people's opinions rarely reflected deeper truths. The Honda sat exactly where Henderson's crew had positioned it, looking even more forlorn now that it officially belonged to someone. Frank approached slowly, his eyes taking in details that the mocking crowd had missed entirely. The rust patterns told stories of where the machine had been stored, while the wear marks on the controls revealed how it had been ridden during its active years. Steele's voice carried clearly across the diminished crowd as he continued his commentary about the foolishness of Frank's purchase. His followers laughed appreciatively at each joke, their amusement feeding on itself, until Frank's simple transaction became the day's primary entertainment. Elena found herself annoyed by their behavior, though she couldn't quite explain why the older man's dignity in the face of ridicule struck her as admirable. Frank knelt beside the Honda, with the careful movements of someone whose knees had absorbed decades of concrete floors and motorcycle maintenance. His hands moved over the machine's surfaces with surprising familiarity, checking components and systems with the unconscious efficiency of long practice. The crowd's laughter gradually quieted as they watched his methodical examination, sensing something they didn't quite understand. The fuel tank's dented surface bore scratches that formed patterns Frank recognized, memories of specific rides and particular moments frozen in metal. He traced one deep gouge with his finger, remembering the day it happened and the laughter that had followed the minor crash. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, her concern mixed with amusement as she helped him assess the damage to both rider and machine. Henderson watched from his platform with growing curiosity, his auctioneer's instincts telling him that something significant was unfolding. Frank's examination of the Honda showed a level of familiarity that went beyond professional assessment, suggesting a personal connection that transformed the crowd's mockery into something more complex and uncomfortable. Frank's hands found the Honda's ignition switch, his fingers recognizing the slightly loose feel that had developed over years of use. The switch housing bore tiny scratches where keys had missed their target during countless starting rituals, each mark representing a ride that had begun with hope and anticipation. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as he prepared for the moment that would change everything. The crowd's attention focused completely on Frank as he reached into his leather vest, the simple action carrying dramatic weight that silenced even Steele's commentary. Elena raised her camera instinctively, her journalistic experience recognizing a pivotal moment even before she understood its significance. The afternoon sunlight caught the metallic gleam of something being withdrawn from Frank's inner pocket. The key that emerged was unlike anything the crowd expected to see. Hand-carved from brass and worn smooth by decades of handling, it carried the patina of age and use that spoke to its significance in ways no modern key could match. Frank held it reverently, his expression showing the complex emotions of someone confronting a powerful memory after years of careful avoidance. Steele's crew fell silent as they recognized that their morning's entertainment had transformed into something deeper and more mysterious. The old man's careful handling of the ornate key suggested a story that reached far beyond their understanding of motorcycle culture and auction dynamics. Elena stepped closer, her camera documenting the moment while her mind raced to understand the implications of what she was witnessing. Frank inserted the key with ceremonial deliberation, the brass sliding into the ignition with the perfect fit that spoke to custom manufacturing and careful preservation. The slight click of the mechanism engaging carried clearly in the sudden quiet, a sound that seemed to bridge past and present in ways the watching crowd couldn't yet comprehend. Henderson found himself holding his breath as Frank's hand moved toward the ignition switch, the simple action carrying weight that transformed a routine auction conclusion into something approaching religious ceremony. His 35 years of running motorcycle auctions had shown him many emotional moments, but nothing had prepared him for the intensity of whatever was about to unfold. The crowd's complete attention focused on Frank's weathered hands as he prepared to turn the key, their earlier mockery replaced by anticipation that bordered on reverence. Even Steele seemed to understand that he was witnessing something significant, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty about the meaning of the old man's actions. The Honda waited, patient and silent, for the moment that would reveal its true nature to those who had dismissed it as worthless junk. Frank's fingers wrapped around the brass key with the familiarity of a handshake between old friends. The metal had warmed under his touch, responding to his presence in ways that transcended simple physics. He closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself a moment of private preparation before the revelation that would change everything for the watching crowd. The turn came slowly, deliberately, with the careful precision of someone performing a sacred ritual. The ignition switch clicked through its positions with mechanical certainty, each detent marking progress toward a moment that had been waiting 3 years to arrive. Frank felt the Honda's electrical system awakening beneath him, circuits completing themselves after their long dormancy. The crowd held its collective breath as Frank pressed the starter button, their earlier mockery transformed into genuine curiosity about what would happen next. Steele's expression had shifted from amusement to confusion, his confidence shaken by the obvious significance this moment held for the older rider. Elena's camera captured every detail as the Honda's starter motor engaged with a strong, healthy whir that surprised everyone within hearing distance. The engine's first revolution came with a deep, authoritative rumble that bore no resemblance to the weak coughing expected from a neglected machine. Instead of the hesitant sputtering typical of long dormant motorcycles, the Honda fired immediately with the confident bark of a well-tuned performance engine. The sound carried across the auction yard with commanding presence that silenced every conversation and drew attention from blocks away. Frank's face transformed as the engine settled into its idle rhythm, years of grief and isolation melting away like morning frost under sunlight. The Honda's distinctive exhaust note triggered a flood of memories so vivid they seemed more real than the present moment. He could feel Sarah's arms around his waist, hear her laughter over the engine noise, smell the mixture of her perfume and motorcycle exhaust that had defined their shared adventures. The crowd's reaction evolved from surprise to amazement as the Honda's true nature revealed itself through sound alone. This was no ordinary motorcycle awakening from storage, but something extraordinary disguised beneath layers of rust and neglect. The engine's note carried harmonics and overtones that spoke to sophisticated internal modifications hidden from casual observation. Henderson stepped down from his platform, drawn by the same magnetic pull that was affecting everyone present. His experienced ear recognized the sound of serious engineering, the kind of deep mechanical work that transformed ordinary machines into something approaching automotive art. The Honda's idle carried the confident rhythm of a racing engine barely contained within street-legal parameters. Steele pushed through the crowd for a closer look, his earlier mockery replaced by professional curiosity about what he was hearing. The Honda's exhaust note suggested internal modifications that would have cost thousands of dollars to implement, engineering work that required both skill and vision to execute properly. His construction background had taught him to recognize quality craftsmanship regardless of its outward appearance. Elena found herself moving closer despite her professional objectivity, drawn by the story that was unfolding before her eyes. The transformation in Frank's demeanor was as dramatic as the Honda's unexpected performance, suggesting connections between man and machine that went far beyond simple ownership. Her recorder captured the engine's distinctive sound, while her mind raced to understand the implications of what she was witnessing. The Honda's idle smoothed as its engine warmed, each cylinder contributing to a symphony that spoke of careful tuning and expensive internal components. Frank's hands moved automatically to the controls, muscle memory guiding adjustments that brought the engine into perfect harmony. His touch was instinctive, revealing an intimacy with this particular machine that came only through countless hours of shared experience. Tears tracked down Frank's weathered cheeks as the full impact of the moment overwhelmed his carefully maintained emotional barriers. The Honda's return to life represented more than mechanical resurrection. It was the awakening of connections he had thought permanently severed by Sarah's death. The engine's voice carried echoes of every ride they had shared, every adventure that had shaped their life together. The crowd stood transfixed as the Honda's true character revealed itself through subtle details that only became apparent with the engine running. The slight shake in the handlebars spoke to a high-performance camshaft, while the exhaust's distinctive popping suggested carburation work that prioritized power over smoothness. This was a machine built for performance rather than comfort, designed by someone who understood racing requirements. Frank blipped the throttle gently, the Honda responding with crisp acceleration that sent its exhaust notes soaring across the auction yard. The sound drew people from neighboring businesses, their curiosity piqued by an engine note that promised stories worth hearing. Even the most cynical observers found themselves affected by the obvious emotion Frank displayed as his forgotten machine returned to life. The Honda's heartbeat transported Frank back to 1973, when his hands were younger, but his passion for motorcycles already burned with the intensity that would define his life's work. The small garage behind their rented house had become his sanctuary, a place where dreams took shape through careful application of skill and vision. Sarah would find him there in the early morning hours, coffee growing cold beside him as he worked by the light of a single bare bulb. The CB350 had arrived as a basket case, its previous owner having abandoned a restoration project that exceeded his abilities and patience. Frank saw potential where others saw problems, recognizing the solid foundation hidden beneath layers of amateur modifications and neglect. He purchased the machine for the price of scrap metal, already envisioning the transformation that would make it worthy of the woman he planned to marry. Sarah had laughed when he first explained his vision for the Honda, her amusement gentle rather than mocking as she tried to understand his excitement about what appeared to be a pile of rusty parts. But she had also brought him sandwiches during his long work sessions and listened patiently as he explained each modification with the enthusiasm of someone discovering new possibilities for mechanical expression. The engine rebuild had consumed 3 months of evenings and weekends, Frank's methodical approach ensuring that every component met his exacting standards. He hand-selected pistons and rings, balanced the crankshaft to racing specifications, and modified the cylinder head with porting work that transformed the mild factory engine into something approaching competition capability. Each improvement was documented in a notebook that Sarah helped him organize. The carburetor system represented Frank's most innovative contribution to the project, a custom manifold that fed twin carburetors through carefully calculated velocity stacks. The modification required extensive fabrication work, each component shaped by hand to achieve the precise airflow characteristics he envisioned. Sarah learned to recognize his satisfaction by the quality of silence that accompanied successful breakthroughs. The wedding was planned for September, and Frank worked with increasing urgency to complete the Honda in time for their honeymoon ride. Sarah had suggested a conventional trip to some tropical destination, but Frank's counter-proposal of a cross-country motorcycle journey appealed to her sense of adventure. The Honda would be their wedding chariot, carrying them toward a future they would build together mile by mile. The custom paint job had been Sarah's contribution to the project, her artistic eye choosing a deep blue that complemented the Honda's mechanical personality. She spent hours applying multiple coats with the patience of someone creating a work of art rather than simply covering metal. Frank watched her work with admiration that went far beyond her technical skill, recognizing in her careful attention to detail the same perfectionist drive that motivated his own craftsmanship. The first test ride had been a revelation, the Honda responding to Frank's inputs with the eager precision of a thoroughbred racehorse. The engine delivered power with smooth authority, while the chassis handled with the balanced confidence that came from careful attention to weight distribution and suspension geometry. Sarah rode behind him on that maiden voyage, her delighted laughter audible even over the modified exhaust note. Their honeymoon journey covered 5,000 miles of American highways and back roads, the Honda carrying them through landscapes that ranged from desert vastness to mountain grandeur. Sarah learned to read the road ahead through Frank's body language, anticipating his lines through curves and adjustments for changing conditions. They developed a wordless communication that made them perfectly synchronized partners in the dance of long-distance riding. The accident had happened in Colorado, a moment of inattention on a mountain pass that sent them sliding across gravel and into the guardrail. Sarah's injuries were serious but not life-threatening, while Frank escaped with only scrapes and bruises. But the Honda suffered significant damage to its front end and fuel tank, the beautiful machine, scarred by the same moment that reminded them how fragile their happiness could be. Frank had rebuilt the Honda after their recovery, but the joy he had once found in the project felt tainted by association with Sarah's pain. She encouraged him to restore the machine to its former glory, insisting that the accident was simply bad luck rather than any failure of his engineering. But Frank couldn't shake the feeling that his pride in the Honda's performance had somehow contributed to the crash. The completed restoration had been mechanically perfect, but emotionally compromised for Frank, who could no longer ride the Honda without remembering Sarah's cries of pain after the accident. He had hidden the machine away in the back of his shop, telling himself he was preserving it for some future occasion when the memories wouldn't sting quite so sharply. Henderson's face changed as recognition dawned, 40 years of accumulated memory suddenly clicking into place like tumblers in a well-oiled lock. The Honda's distinctive exhaust note had triggered recollections of a legendary machine that had dominated local racing circuits in the mid-70s, a blue blur that had humbled much more expensive competition through superior engineering and fearless riding. "Sweet mother of pearl," Henderson whispered, his words carrying clearly in the sudden quiet that had descended over the auction yard. "That's the Ghost Rider's Honda." The name meant nothing to Steele's younger crew, but the older attendees felt electric recognition course through their ranks. The Ghost Rider had been a local legend, a mysterious figure who appeared at racetracks with machines that defied conventional wisdom about what small displacement motorcycles could accomplish. His blue Honda had been the stuff of racing folklore, a machine that had rewritten the rules about power-to-weight ratios and rider skill. Elena's journalistic instincts sharpened as she noticed the change in crowd dynamics, her recorder capturing the whispered conversations that were spreading through the assembly like wildfire. She began approaching the older spectators, seeking context for what was clearly a significant revelation in the local motorcycle community's collective memory. "Frank Morrison," an elderly man in worn leathers said when Elena asked about the Ghost Rider's identity. "Haven't seen him race in decades, but I'll never forget watching him take that little Honda through the chicane at Riverside, made riders on bikes twice the size look like weekend warriors." Steele found himself researching Frank's name on his smartphone, his earlier mockery replaced by curiosity about the man he had been ridiculing. The search results painted a picture of racing achievements that spanned 2 decades, multiple championship titles, and a reputation for mechanical innovation that had influenced an entire generation of builders and riders. Frank remained focused on the Honda, his hands making subtle adjustments to the idle mixture while his mind processed the crowd's growing recognition. He had hoped to complete this reunion in private, but understood that such moments rarely offered the luxury of solitude. The Honda's voice was calling to everyone within hearing distance, demanding acknowledgement of its true nature. The vintage racing trophy that Henderson remembered seeing in Frank's shop decades ago had been earned on this very machine. The little Honda's David versus Goliath victory over much larger competition, cementing Frank's reputation as both rider and builder. The trophy had gathered dust for years, but the achievement it represented remained fresh in the memories of those who had witnessed the impossible performance. "This machine set 3 track records in 1974, Henderson announced to the crowd, his auctioneer's voice carrying the authority of someone who had been present for those historic runs. "I watched Frank Morrison ride it to victory against bikes that should have eaten it alive. Never seen anything like it before or since." Elena's camera captured the transformation in Frank's posture as the crowd's ridicule turned to respect, though she could see that the attention made him uncomfortable rather than proud. This was a man who had clearly retreated from public recognition, preferring the solitude of his grief to the celebration of past achievements. Steele approached Frank with new respect, his earlier antagonism replaced by genuine curiosity about the engineering secrets hidden beneath the Honda's modest exterior. "What kind of modifications are we talking about here?" he asked, his tone carrying the deference due to a recognized master of the craft. Frank's response was measured, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom rather than boastful pride. "Nothing that violates the basic principles," he said quietly. "Just everything done right, with attention to details that most people overlook." The local news crew that Elena had contacted earlier chose that moment to arrive, their equipment adding a surreal quality to what had begun as a simple motorcycle auction. Frank's discomfort with the attention was obvious, but he endured the cameras with the same dignity he had shown during the crowd's earlier mockery. Henderson found himself fielding questions from reporters who wanted background on Frank's racing career and the Honda's historical significance. The story was becoming larger than anyone had anticipated, reaching beyond the local motorcycle community to touch broader themes of hidden talent and unexpected revelation. "Frank Morrison was the best rider I ever saw," Henderson told the gathering media. "Could make any machine perform beyond its specifications, but this Honda was something special. Built it for his new wife, then rode it to championship glory. Haven't seen either of them since Sarah passed." The mention of Sarah's name brought a visible shadow across Frank's features, reminding everyone present that this reunion carried emotional weight that transcended simple mechanical achievement. The Honda represented more than racing success. It was a tangible connection to a love story that had shaped everything about Frank's approach to life and motorcycles. Frank's decision to take the Honda for a test ride seemed to materialize without conscious thought, his body moving toward the motorcycle with the inevitability of water finding its level. The crowd stepped back instinctively, creating space for what everyone sensed would be a significant moment. Elena positioned herself to capture whatever was about to unfold, her camera ready while her notebook balanced on her knee. The riding gloves emerged from Frank's vest pocket like sacred artifacts, their leather surfaces worn smooth by decades of use and still carrying the faint scent of the oils Sarah had used to condition them. These had been her final gift to him before the cancer began its relentless advance, purchased during their last Christmas together when she still harbored hope that he would find his way back to the road they had shared. Frank pulled the gloves on slowly, each finger settling into its familiar groove with the precision of a ritual that bridged past and present. The leather had shaped itself to his hands over countless miles, becoming an extension of his sense of touch rather than merely protective equipment. Sarah had insisted he wear them during their final rides together, claiming they brought him luck, despite his protests that skill mattered more than superstition. The Honda seemed to recognize his presence as he settled onto the seat, the machine's personality awakening in response to contact with its true rider. Frank's hands found the controls with unconscious accuracy, muscle memory guiding adjustments to mirrors and foot pegs that brought everything into perfect alignment. The familiar embrace of the riding position transported him across decades to younger days when the future had seemed unlimited. Henderson had cleared a path through the auction yard, his assistants moving other motorcycles to create a safe route for Frank's demonstration. The crowd gathered along the makeshift course, their earlier skepticism replaced by anticipation that bordered on reverence. Steele's crew watched with particular intensity, their modern understanding of motorcycle performance about to receive an education in the possibilities that existed before computers and fuel injection. Frank's first acceleration was gentle, allowing both rider and machine to reacquaint themselves with each other's rhythms. The Honda responded with eager compliance, its engine delivering power with the linear smoothness that spoke to careful attention to internal balance and compression ratios. The exhaust note climbed through its range with musical precision, each RPM increase adding harmonics that revealed the depth of Frank's engineering work. The crowd's reaction was immediate and unanimous. This was no ordinary motorcycle awakening from storage, but a finely tuned instrument demonstrating capabilities that defied its humble origins. The Honda's acceleration curve remained smooth and progressive, well beyond the point where most machines would have reached their peak, suggesting internal modifications that had transformed its basic character without sacrificing reliability. Elena found herself holding her breath as Frank guided the Honda through a series of figure eights that showcased both his skill and the machine's responsive handling. The motorcycle leaned into turns with confidence that spoke to suspension work that balanced comfort with precision, while Frank's body position revealed the unconscious grace that separated true riders from mere operators of mechanical equipment. Steele stepped closer to the course, his professional appreciation for performance motorcycles forcing him to acknowledge the Honda's obvious capabilities. The little machine was demonstrating acceleration and handling characteristics that would have been impressive in any era, while its current performance suggested that Frank's engineering work had been decades ahead of its time. Frank's transformation was as dramatic as the Honda's revelation, years of grief and isolation falling away like shed skin as he rediscovered the pure joy that had originally drawn him to motorcycles. His posture straightened, his movements became more fluid, and his expression carried the quiet confidence of someone operating at the peak of his abilities. The connection between man and machine was so obvious that even casual observers could recognize its significance. The technical demonstration concluded with Frank bringing the Honda to a stop precisely where he had started, the engine settling into its distinctive idle with the satisfied rumble of a machine that had been allowed to express its true nature. The crowd's applause was spontaneous and sustained, their appreciation recognizing both the motorcycle's performance and Frank's obvious mastery of its capabilities. Henderson approached Frank with a mixture of respect and curiosity, his years of experience allowing him to appreciate the technical achievement he had just witnessed. "That machine's been modified, way beyond factory specifications," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen thousands of motorcycles pass through his business. Frank's response carried the quiet pride of someone who had spent decades perfecting his craft without seeking recognition. "Everything Sarah and I learned about making motorcycles better," he said simply, "all of it went into this one machine." David Morrison's arrival created a disturbance that rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped into still water. The black BMW sedan looked conspicuously out of place among the pickup trucks and motorcycle trailers that dominated the auction yard, its pristine paint and corporate elegance marking its driver as someone from a different world entirely. David emerged, wearing a charcoal business suit that spoke to his success in the legal profession while simultaneously announcing his disconnection from the motorcycle culture surrounding him. The legal documents tucked under David's arm represented weeks of preparation and consultation with elder care attorneys who specialized in competency proceedings. His concern for Frank's well-being was genuine, but it was filtered through a corporate mindset that reduced complex emotional situations to problems requiring systematic solutions. The papers outlined a careful strategy for protecting Frank's assets while gradually assuming responsibility for his care and decision-making. Frank's expression hardened as he recognized his son's approach, the joy he had rediscovered during the Honda's demonstration evaporating like morning dew under harsh sunlight. Their relationship had been strained for years, but the gulf between them had widened considerably since Sarah's death. David's inability to understand his father's grief had created barriers that seemed to grow higher with each awkward conversation and missed opportunity for connection. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" David's question carried the exasperation of someone who had been fielding embarrassing phone calls about his father's public behavior. The news coverage of Frank's unexpected purchase had reached David's law firm within hours, generating the kind of attention that threatened his carefully cultivated professional image. Elena positioned herself to capture the family confrontation, her journalistic instincts recognizing the human drama that often provided the most compelling elements of any story. The contrast between father and son was stark. Frank's authentic connection to the motorcycle community versus David's obvious discomfort with everything the environment represented. "I'm reclaiming something that belongs to me," Frank replied quietly, his voice carrying the patient weariness of someone who had explained this situation too many times already. The Honda idled peacefully beside him, its mechanical presence providing stability in a conversation that threatened to spiral toward familiar patterns of misunderstanding and mutual frustration. David's concern about Frank's mental state was written clearly across his features as he surveyed the crowd of rough-looking bikers and the obviously worthless motorcycle that had somehow become the center of attention. His worldview simply couldn't accommodate the possibility that his elderly father possessed hidden depths or legitimate reasons for his seemingly irrational behavior. "You spent money on that piece of junk?" David gestured toward the Honda with undisguised disgust. "Dad, people are saying you've lost your mind. My partners are asking questions about your competency, and frankly, I'm starting to wonder myself." The crowd's reaction to David's dismissive attitude was immediate and negative, their protective instincts aroused by his obvious disrespect for both Frank and the machine he had just demonstrated with such skill. Steele stepped closer, his presence subtly menacing as he positioned himself within David's peripheral vision. Henderson's expression showed the kind of disapproval reserved for people who violated the unwritten codes of respect that governed his business. Frank's anger was controlled but unmistakable, his voice taking on the steel that had once made him formidable in business negotiations and racing competitions. "That piece of junk was your mother's wedding gift. It carried us across the country on our honeymoon and won 3 championships before I put it away. Maybe if you'd spent more time learning about our life instead of running away from it, you'd understand what you're looking at." Elena found herself torn between professional objectivity and personal sympathy for Frank's position. David's corporate approach to his father's emotional needs represented everything that was wrong with how modern society handled aging and grief. The story was becoming more complex than a simple human interest piece about an unexpected auction purchase. "The Honda set track records that still stand today," Henderson interjected, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed Frank's legendary performances. "Your father is probably the finest motorcycle builder and rider this state has ever produced. Maybe you should be proud instead of embarrassed." David's response revealed the deep misunderstanding that had poisoned his relationship with Frank for years. That was 40 years ago. Now he's 70 years old, living alone in a house that's too big for him, and buying junk motorcycles at public auctions. "I'm trying to protect him from himself before he gets hurt or wastes everything Mom left behind." The mention of Sarah's legacy struck Frank like a physical blow, his carefully maintained composure cracking as emotions he had kept buried for 3 years finally found expression. "Your mother understood what this machine meant to us. She would have wanted me to find it again, not hide from it, because you're ashamed of where you came from." Steele's challenge materialized with the dramatic timing that seemed to govern significant moments in motorcycle culture, his voice cutting through the family tension with an authority that commanded immediate attention from everyone present. The big man stepped forward with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the dominant force in any gathering, his presence shifting the crowd's focus from the Morrison family drama to the possibility of genuine competition. "Enough talk about the old days," Steele announced, his words carrying clearly across the auction yard. "If that little Honda is really something special, let's see what it can do against a real motorcycle." He gestured toward his pristine Harley-Davidson Road King, its chrome surfaces gleaming in the afternoon sunlight like a metallic challenge thrown down at Frank's feet. The vintage stopwatch that Henderson produced from his jacket pocket had timed countless unofficial races over the decades, its mechanical precision serving as neutral arbiter for disputes that words alone couldn't settle. The device had witnessed everything from friendly wagering to serious grudge matches, its steady, ticking marking moments that became local legend among the riding community. Frank's initial instinct was to decline the challenge, his cautious nature reinforced by 3 years of avoiding situations that might lead to emotional exposure or physical risk. But Steele's timing was perfect, the challenge arriving precisely when Frank's rediscovered connection to the Honda made retreat feel like betrayal of everything the machine represented. "Quarter mile, from the auction entrance to Henderson's back fence," Steele continued, outlining terms that would test both machines and riders under conditions that favored his heavier, more powerful Harley. The course was straight enough to showcase pure acceleration, while being short enough to prevent either rider from reaching truly dangerous speeds. David's horror at the proposed race was written clearly across his features as he calculated the liability implications and potential for serious injury. His legal mind immediately began cataloging the ways such a competition could go wrong, creating scenarios that ranged from property damage to wrongful death lawsuits that could destroy both participants financially and legally. "Dad, you cannot be seriously considering this," David said, his voice rising with panic as he recognized the determined expression that crossed Frank's weathered features. "You're 70 years old. For God's sake, what if you get hurt? What if someone else gets hurt? The insurance implications alone." Elena found herself documenting a moment that crystallized everything she had been trying to understand about motorcycle culture and its relationship to modern society. The challenge represented more than simple competition. It was a test of values, a confrontation between different generations' understanding of what constituted appropriate risk and meaningful achievement. Steele's crew gathered around their leader with the enthusiasm of people who lived for moments like this, their conversations filled with technical speculation about the outcome and confident predictions of their champion's inevitable victory. The Harley's obvious advantages in displacement and torque made the contest seem predetermined, at least to observers who hadn't witnessed the Honda's demonstration. Henderson found himself appointed as official timekeeper and course marshal, roles he had filled countless times over the decades, but never under circumstances that carried such emotional weight. His concern for Frank's safety warred with his respect for the man's legendary abilities, creating internal conflict that reflected the crowd's mixed feelings about the proposed competition. "If I win," Steele announced, "you sell me that Honda for $50,000. If you win, I'll publicly apologize for laughing and acknowledge that the old school still has something to teach the new generation." The stakes carried symbolic weight that far exceeded their monetary value, representing a test between different philosophies of motorcycle culture and competing definitions of what truly mattered in riding. Frank's acceptance would mean risking not just his physical safety, but the Honda's future, potentially losing the machine that represented his strongest connection to Sarah's memory. Frank's response came after a long moment of internal calculation, his decision process weighing factors that went far beyond simple pride or competitive spirit. The Honda deserved to be vindicated, its engineering brilliance demonstrated under conditions that would silence all doubt about its capabilities. More importantly, Sarah's faith in both man and machine demanded this moment of truth. "All right," Frank said quietly, his words carrying the finality of someone who had made an irrevocable commitment. "But we do this properly. Henderson sets the rules, times the runs, and makes the final determination. No arguments afterward, regardless of the outcome." The crowd's reaction was immediate and electric, their excitement building as word spread through the auction yard that a genuine race was about to unfold. Elena's phone buzzed with notifications as her social media posts about the developing drama attracted attention from motorcycle enthusiasts across the region, transforming a local event into something approaching viral status. David's desperate attempt to intervene was overwhelmed by the momentum of events and his father's obvious determination to proceed. The legal documents in his briefcase suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to the very real possibility that Frank might be injured or killed in pursuit of validating a 40-year-old motorcycle's performance capabilities. Frank's preparation for the race began with the methodical routine he had followed before every significant ride for 40 years, his hands moving automatically through safety checks, while his mind processed the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. The Honda waited patiently beneath him, its engine maintaining the steady idle that spoke to mechanical health and readiness for whatever demands would be placed upon it. The seat compartment opened with the small click that Frank remembered from thousands of previous accesses, the space where he and Sarah had always stored their essential items during long rides. His fingers expected to find the usual collection of tools and spare parts that practical riders carried, but instead encountered the unmistakable texture of paper wrapped in protective plastic. Sarah's handwriting was unmistakable, even through the clear covering, her distinctive script carrying the careful formation that had characterized every note she had ever left for him. Frank's hands trembled as he extracted the letter, his heart racing with the recognition that his wife had somehow reached across the 3 years since her death to deliver a message at precisely the moment when he most needed her guidance. The letter's date corresponded to the final weeks of Sarah's life, when the cancer had left her too weak for their customary rides, but her mind remained sharp and focused on the future she wouldn't live to see. Frank's eyes filled with tears as he recognized the enormous effort this communication must have required, the careful planning necessary to ensure it would reach him at the right moment. "My dearest Frank," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then my plan worked and you found your way back to the Honda. I know you're probably angry with me for orchestrating this, but I couldn't bear the thought of you spending the rest of your life hiding from everything that brought us joy together. The revelation that Sarah had secretly arranged for the Honda's appearance at Henderson's auction hit Frank like a physical blow, his understanding of recent events shifting as he realized that chance had played no role in his discovery of the machine. His wife's love had reached beyond death to guide him toward this moment of confrontation with his own grief and isolation. "I've been working with Jim Henderson for months, making sure the Honda would be positioned exactly where you'd find it. The rust and neglect are mostly cosmetic. I had the engine and mechanicals completely restored, while you thought it was gathering dust in storage. The bike is actually in better condition now than when we rode it on our honeymoon." Frank's sobs came without warning, 3 years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through the barriers he had constructed to protect himself from the pain of loss. The Honda's engine continued its steady rhythm beneath him, providing mechanical comfort while his world reorganized itself around Sarah's continuing presence in his life. The letter continued with details about the restoration work Sarah had commissioned, her careful attention to preserving the Honda's original character while updating components that had deteriorated over decades of storage. She had spent considerable resources ensuring that Frank's reunion with the machine would be triumph rather than disappointment, victory instead of another reminder of everything he had lost. "I know you blame yourself for the accident, and I know you've been carrying that guilt for all these years. But Frank, that crash gave us 43 wonderful years together that we might never have had if we'd been too careful to take risks. The Honda didn't cause our accident, bad luck did. And the Honda didn't take me away from you, cancer did. It's time to stop punishing yourself and this beautiful machine for things that were never your fault." The crowd had noticed Frank's emotional breakdown, their conversations quieting as they recognized that something profound was happening beyond their understanding. Elena's camera captured the moment while maintaining respectful distance, her journalistic instincts balanced against recognition that some stories were too personal for public consumption. Henderson approached slowly, his concern evident as he recognized the magnitude of Frank's distress. The auctioneer had been part of Sarah's conspiracy, his role extending far beyond simple business transaction to encompass the careful orchestration of events that had led to this moment of revelation and healing. "She made me promise to take care of the details," Henderson said quietly when Frank looked up from the letter. "The rust was applied with chemicals that would wash off easily. The engine work was done by the best shop in 3 states. Sarah wanted everything to be perfect when you finally came home." David's discovery of the letter's contents came through Frank's halting explanation, his corporate worldview struggling to accommodate the reality of his mother's elaborate posthumous intervention. The legal documents in his briefcase suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to the evidence of Sarah's profound understanding of her husband's emotional needs and her determination to address them even after death. Frank's transformation was visible to everyone present as Sarah's words released him from 3 years of self-imposed emotional imprisonment. The Honda beneath him no longer represented guilt and loss, but rather the enduring power of love to transcend death and guide the living toward renewed purpose and joy. The restoration receipt that tumbled from Sarah's letter carried the letterhead of Preston's Custom Motors, the most respected motorcycle restoration shop within 500 miles. The detailed invoice revealed work that had cost more than most people spent on new motorcycles, with line items that spoke to Sarah's determination to make Frank's reunion with the Honda absolutely perfect in every mechanical detail. Sarah's secret meetings with Jim Henderson had begun 6 months before her death, their conspiracy unfolding through carefully planned conversations that balanced her weakening physical condition against her urgent need to ensure Frank's emotional recovery. Henderson's role had been complex, requiring him to maintain the fiction of the Honda's deteriorated condition while ensuring its mechanical excellence remained hidden beneath layers of cosmetic neglect. The medical records that David discovered in his mother's personal effects painted a picture of terminal illness managed with extraordinary grace and forward-thinking planning. Sarah had known for months that her time was limited, but instead of retreating into self-pity or denial, she had focused her remaining energy on creating a legacy that would guide Frank through the grief she knew would follow her death. Elena's recording captured Henderson's emotional explanation of Sarah's elaborate planning process. his voice breaking as he described the dying woman's meticulous attention to details that would ensure her husband's eventual healing. She came to the shop every week, sometimes barely able to walk, making sure every specification was exactly right. Said Frank would know immediately if anything wasn't perfect. The revelation that Sarah had arranged for the Honda to appear worthless while remaining mechanically sound required sophisticated coordination between multiple parties. The restoration work had been completed months before the auction, with the machine then subjected to carefully applied cosmetic deterioration that would fool casual observers while preserving its essential performance capabilities. David's understanding of his mother's true motivations came gradually, his corporate mindset struggling to process the emotional intelligence that had guided Sarah's posthumous intervention. The legal documents he had prepared to protect Frank's assets suddenly seemed crude and inappropriate compared to the subtle psychological healing his mother had orchestrated through mechanical resurrection. "She knew you'd try to institutionalize him," Henderson told David bluntly, his words carrying the weight of conversations he had shared with Sarah during her final months. "Said you meant well but didn't understand that taking away his independence would kill him faster than any motorcycle ever could." Frank's conversation with Sarah's memory took place in the privacy of his own mind, their familiar communication patterns reasserting themselves as he processed the magnitude of her continuing love and intervention. The Honda's engine provided mechanical meditation while he absorbed the reality that his wife's influence in his life hadn't ended with her death but had simply taken new and more subtle forms. The crowd's reaction to Frank's emotional transformation was respectful but curious, their limited understanding of the situation leaving them uncertain about appropriate responses. Steele's challenge suddenly seemed less important than the obvious healing taking place before their eyes, the race becoming secondary to the human drama that was unfolding through mechanical resurrection. Sarah's arrangements had extended beyond simple restoration to include specific instructions about timing and presentation that would maximize the emotional impact of Frank's discovery. She had studied his behavioral patterns with the attention to detail that characterized her approach to everything that mattered, predicting his reactions with the accuracy that came from 43 years of intimate partnership. David's phone conversation with his law firm's senior partner resulted in the immediate withdrawal of the competency proceedings, his explanation of recent developments, convincing his colleagues that Frank's mental state was far more complex than their initial assessment had suggested. The legal strategy that had seemed appropriate hours earlier now appeared misguided and potentially harmful to the family relationships David was trying to protect. The prescription bottles hidden in Sarah's personal effects revealed the extent of her physical suffering during the months when she had been planning Frank's emotional recovery. Her determination to complete the Honda project, despite increasing pain and weakness, demonstrated a strength of will that David was only beginning to appreciate as he learned the details of her secret activities. Frank's renewed connection to the motorcycle community began with his acceptance of Steele's challenge, the race representing not just mechanical competition, but his symbolic return to the world of risk and passion that Sarah had wanted him to reclaim. The Honda beneath him carried her blessing for whatever came next, her love transformed into mechanical confidence that would sustain him through whatever challenges lay ahead. Henderson's admission that he had been Sarah's co-conspirator for months revealed the depth of planning that had gone into creating this moment of revelation and healing. The auction had been carefully orchestrated to ensure Frank would find the Honda under circumstances that would force him to confront his grief while providing the community support necessary for his emotional recovery. Frank's racing helmet emerged from the Honda's storage compartment like a sacred relic, its surface bearing the careful modifications that Sarah had insisted upon during their racing years together. Her initials were etched into the chin bar alongside their wedding anniversary date, personal touches that transformed functional safety equipment into something approaching religious significance. The helmet had protected Frank through countless races and adventures, its familiar weight settling onto his shoulders like the embrace of old friendship. The community's transformation from spectators to active supporters happened gradually, their collective recognition of Frank's emotional journey inspiring offers of assistance that went far beyond simple curiosity about the upcoming race. Henderson's crew began preparing the course with professional attention to safety details, while local riders shared technical advice and encouragement that bridged generational divides. Steele's team approached their preparation with the methodical efficiency that characterized their leaders' approach to motorcycle competition. Their conversations focused on technical specifications and strategic considerations that would maximize their machine's advantages. The Harley's superior displacement and torque gave them confidence that bordered on certainty, their only concern being the unexpected performance Frank had demonstrated during his earlier test ride. Elena's coverage had attracted attention from motorcycle journalists across the region, their arrival transforming Henderson's auction yard into an impromptu media center that documented every aspect of the developing story. The narrative had evolved beyond simple human interest into something that touched broader themes about aging, grief, family relationships, and the healing power of mechanical passion. Frank's physical preparation routine hadn't changed significantly over the decades, his approach to racing remaining grounded in the fundamentals that had served him throughout his competitive career. He stretched carefully, checked his gear methodically, and performed the mental exercises that would help him achieve the focused state necessary for maximum performance. David's reluctant decision to support his father came after lengthy internal struggle, his protective instincts warring with newfound respect for the complexity of Frank's emotional needs. The discovery of Sarah's elaborate planning had forced him to reconsider everything he thought he understood about his parents' relationship and his father's current mental state. "If you're going to do this crazy thing," David told Frank, "then I'm going to be here to make sure you have the best possible chance of coming through it safely." His offer to serve as Frank's crew chief represented the first collaborative effort between father and son in over a decade. The Honda's technical inspection became an impromptu education session as Frank explained the mechanical modifications that had transformed the modest machine into a competitive racing platform. Steele and his crew gathered around with genuine curiosity, their modern understanding of motorcycle performance expanding as they learned about engineering solutions that predated computer-assisted design by decades. Frank's pre-race ceremony at Sarah's gravesite was private, but somehow felt by everyone present, his conversation with her memory providing the spiritual preparation that complemented his physical and mechanical readiness. The Honda waited in the auction yard while Frank sought his wife's blessing for the challenge ahead, their communication transcending the boundaries between life and death. Henderson's role as race official carried weight that extended beyond simple timekeeping, his presence serving as neutral arbiter for a competition that had grown to represent more than mechanical performance. The vintage stopwatch in his hands had witnessed countless unofficial races over the decades, but none had carried the emotional significance of what was about to unfold. Steele's genuine respect for Frank's legendary status created an unexpected dynamic that elevated the competition above simple antagonism towards something approaching mutual honor. The big man's earlier mockery had been replaced by acknowledgement that he was about to race against one of the most accomplished riders in local history, mounted on a machine that had already demonstrated capabilities that defied conventional wisdom. The crowd's energy built steadily as race time approached, their anticipation fed by social media coverage that had attracted motorcycle enthusiasts from across the state. What had begun as a simple auction had evolved into a gathering that celebrated both individual achievement and community solidarity, with Frank's story resonating beyond the immediate riding community. Elena's documentary crew positioned themselves to capture the race from multiple angles, their equipment representing the transformation of a personal moment into public narrative. The story had grown beyond local interest to touch themes that would resonate with audiences who had never ridden motorcycles but understood the universal experiences of loss, healing, and the courage required to face life's challenges. Frank's final mechanical adjustments to the Honda were performed with the ritual precision that had characterized his approach to racing preparation throughout his career. Each component received attention that went beyond mere function to encompass the spiritual relationship between rider and machine that made the difference between competent performance and transcendent achievement. Race day arrived. With the crystalline clarity that sometimes blessed significant moments, the autumn air carrying just enough coolness to maximize engine performance while providing perfect visibility for the crowd that had gathered to witness what many sensed would be a historic confrontation. The auction yard had been transformed overnight into an impromptu racing venue, with Henderson's crew working until dawn to ensure proper safety measures and course preparation. Frank's original build blueprints had surfaced from David's exploration of his parents' personal effects, the hand-drawn technical specifications revealing the depth of engineering innovation that had gone into the Honda's creation 50 years earlier. The documents showed modifications that were decades ahead of their time, design solutions that modern motorcycle engineers would recognize as sophisticated approaches to problems that most builders of that era hadn't even identified. The media attention had grown beyond anyone's expectations, with motorcycle publications and local news outlets joining Elena's original coverage to document what was being described as a clash between old-school engineering and modern performance philosophy. The story had captured public imagination because it touched universal themes about aging, legacy, and the courage required to prove oneself against younger competition. Frank's pre-race interview was conducted with the grace and dignity that had characterized his approach to competition throughout his racing career. His responses thoughtful and measured despite the obvious pressure he was feeling. When asked about his motivation for accepting Steele's challenge, Frank's answer was simple: "Some things are worth the risk. This machine represents everything Sarah and I learned about making motorcycles better. It deserves a chance to show what it can do." Steele's team had arrived early to complete their own preparation routine, their approach characterized by the systematic efficiency that marked modern motorcycle competition. The Harley had been equipped with every performance advantage that factory specifications and aftermarket modifications could provide, its chrome surfaces gleaming under the morning sun like armor prepared for battle. David's public support for his father represented a dramatic shift in their relationship. His press statement acknowledging Frank's legendary status while expressing confidence in both the Honda's capabilities and his father's continued riding skills. The legal documents that had seemed so important hours earlier now rested forgotten in David's briefcase, superseded by his growing understanding of what truly mattered to Frank's well-being. Elena's documentary had attracted attention from national motorcycle media, their presence transforming a local event into something that would be remembered long after the immediate participants had moved on to other concerns. The story resonated because it combined mechanical achievement with human drama, showcasing the connections between people and their machines that gave motorcycle culture its enduring appeal. The community members who had gathered represented every segment of the local riding population, from weekend enthusiasts to serious racers who understood the technical significance of what they were about to witness. Frank's story had touched something deeper than simple curiosity, inspiring people to take time from their busy lives to support someone whose achievements had helped define their shared culture. Henderson's course inspection was thorough and professional, his years of experience guiding safety preparations that would minimize risk while preserving the competitive integrity of the quarter-mile confrontation. The finish line had been precisely measured and marked, with timing equipment borrowed from the local drag strip, ensuring accurate documentation of whatever was about to unfold. Frank's conversation with the Honda before the race was conducted in the privacy of his own mind, their communication following patterns established over decades of shared experience. The machine's mechanical presence provided comfort and confidence, while Frank prepared mentally for the challenge ahead, their partnership transcending the boundary between rider and equipment. Steele's acknowledgement of Frank's racing legacy was genuine and respectful, his earlier antagonism replaced by recognition that he was about to compete against someone whose achievements had influenced an entire generation of riders and builders. The challenge had evolved beyond simple bragging rights to become a test between different eras of motorcycle development and racing philosophy. The crowd's anticipation was palpable as both riders completed their final preparations, their energy building toward the moment when theory would be tested against reality and speculation would be replaced by measurable performance. Conversations buzzed with technical predictions and emotional support, creating an atmosphere that combined county fair excitement with the reverence usually reserved for religious ceremonies. Frank's final glance towards Sarah's photograph, carefully tucked into his vest pocket next to his heart, completed his spiritual preparation for the race ahead. Her presence felt stronger than it had since her death, her blessing for whatever came next, providing the confidence that would allow him to ride without reservation or fear of the consequences. The starting line materialized at Henderson's auction entrance, where both machines idled side by side with their riders poised for the signal that would unleash a quarter-mile of pure competition. Frank's Honda maintained its distinctive exhaust note, the sound carrying undertones that spoke to sophisticated internal work hidden beneath its humble exterior. Steele's Harley rumbled with the deep authority of displacement and chrome, its modern engineering representing everything contemporary motorcycle culture valued. Henderson raised the checkered flag that would serve as their starting signal, his position carefully chosen to provide equal visibility for both riders while maintaining safety distance from the acceleration zone. The crowd fell silent as the moment approached, their collective breath held in anticipation of what many sensed would be a defining moment in local motorcycle history. Frank's launch technique hadn't changed significantly over the decades, his approach to drag racing still grounded in the fundamentals that had served him throughout his competitive career. He modulated the Honda's clutch with the precise control that came from intimate familiarity with the machine's power delivery characteristics, allowing maximum acceleration without overwhelming the rear tire's grip capabilities. Steele's aggressive start showcased modern approaches to motorcycle drag racing, his technique refined through participation in organized events where competition was measured in thousandths of seconds rather than simple bragging rights. The Harley's superior torque gave him an immediate advantage off the line, its heavy-duty drivetrain transferring power to the pavement with authority that seemed to guarantee victory. The first 100 feet belonged to Steele, his machine's displacement advantage, creating a lead that appeared insurmountable to observers who understood motorcycle performance primarily through mathematical specifications. The Harley's acceleration was impressive and seemingly decisive, its modern engineering delivering exactly the performance that factory engineers had designed into the machine. Frank's response came as the Honda's power band began to assert itself, the machine's carefully tuned engine characteristics revealing their true nature as the RPMs climbed toward their optimal range. The little motorcycle's acceleration curve remained linear well beyond the point where most machines would have reached their peak, suggesting internal modifications that had fundamentally altered its performance envelope. The crowd's reaction evolved from surprised murmurs to genuine amazement as Frank began closing the gap that Steele's early lead had established. The Honda's distinctive exhaust note climbed through its range with musical precision, each RPM increase adding harmonics that revealed the depth of Frank's engineering work. This was no restored antique, demonstrating nostalgic charm. It was a purpose-built racing machine showing its true capabilities. Steele's expression shifted from confidence to concern as he realized that his substantial early advantage was disappearing with each passing yard. The Honda's relentless acceleration was defying everything his modern understanding of motorcycle performance suggested should be possible from such a small displacement machine. His Harley was performing exactly as expected, but Frank's engineering had created something that transcended conventional limitations. The halfway point marked Frank's transition from pursuer to equal, the Honda's superior power-to-weight ratio finally overcoming the Harley's displacement advantage through careful attention to details that Steele's machine couldn't match. Frank's riding position was textbook perfect, his body position minimizing aerodynamic drag while maintaining precise control over the Honda's trajectory. Elena's cameras captured the moment when Frank took the lead, her equipment documenting what would become one of the most celebrated upsets in local racing history. The visual drama was unmistakable. David versus Goliath played out through mechanical competition that showcased the enduring relevance of engineering excellence over simple specification advantages. The final 100 feet belonged entirely to Frank, the Honda's acceleration advantage becoming more pronounced as both machines approached their maximum speeds. Steele's gracious acceptance of defeat was evident even before the finish line, his respect for Frank's achievement overriding any disappointment about his own performance. The Harley had run exactly as its specifications suggested it should. The Honda had simply run better. Henderson's stopwatch confirmed what everyone present had witnessed, the Honda's victory margin substantial enough to eliminate any question about the outcome. Frank's elapsed time would have been competitive even in modern racing, demonstrating that his 50-year-old engineering work remained relevant in contemporary performance contexts. The crowd's reaction was immediate and sustained, their applause recognizing both Frank's riding skill and the Honda's mechanical excellence. Steele was among the first to offer congratulations, his respect for the achievement overriding any personal disappointment about the unexpected outcome. The race had demonstrated truths about motorcycle performance that transcended simple mathematics and brand loyalty. Frank's victory celebration was subdued but deeply felt, his joy tempered by the knowledge that Sarah's spirit had guided him through the most significant challenge he had faced since her death. The Honda's engine settled into its familiar idle as he coasted back toward the starting line, the machine's mechanical voice carrying satisfaction that seemed to reflect its vindication after decades of dormancy. The new workshop sign arrived 3 months after the race, its hand-painted letters spelling Morrison and Son Custom Motorcycles in script that honored both tradition and the future. Frank and David were building together. The design incorporated elements from Frank's original shop logo while adding modern touches that reflected David's contribution to their partnership, creating visual harmony that symbolized their renewed relationship. Frank's decision to reopen his motorcycle business had emerged gradually from the attention his Honda demonstration had generated, with customers seeking him out for restoration projects and custom builds that challenged his skills while providing renewed purpose. The work felt different now, infused with Sarah's blessing and David's practical support in ways that made each project more meaningful than simple mechanical achievement. David's career transition from corporate law to motorcycle business management had surprised his former colleagues, but felt completely natural to him once the decision was made. His legal background proved invaluable in handling contracts and regulatory requirements, while his business training helped establish systems that allowed Frank to focus on the creative and technical aspects of their work. Steele's transformation into Frank's first apprentice represented one of the most unexpected outcomes of their quarter-mile confrontation, the younger man's respect for Frank's achievements evolving into genuine desire to learn traditional building techniques. His modern perspective combined with Frank's classical knowledge created collaborative possibilities that neither man could have achieved independently. Elena's documentary had premiered at the International Motorcycle Film Festival, its emotional impact resonating with audiences who found universal themes in Frank's story of loss, recovery, and renewed purpose. The film's success had brought recognition to both Frank's engineering achievements and the broader cultural significance of motorcycle craftsmanship as artistic expression. The Honda itself had become the centerpiece of the National Motorcycle Heritage Museum, its display recognizing both the machine's technical innovation and its role in Frank's emotional journey. Visitors could examine the engineering details that had made Frank's victory possible while learning about the love story that had inspired its creation. Frank's daily routine now included morning conversations with Sarah at her gravesite, but these exchanges carried different emotional weight than the grief-stricken monologues that had characterized his visits during the 3 years after her death. Their communication had evolved into collaborative planning sessions where he shared his current projects and sought her guidance on decisions that affected their shared legacy. David's growing understanding of motorcycle culture had transformed his relationship with his father beyond simple reconciliation toward genuine partnership based on mutual respect and complementary skills. His legal training helped Frank navigate regulatory requirements, while his business experience ensured their shop's financial stability and growth potential. The riding community's embrace of Frank's return had created opportunities for teaching and mentorship that fulfilled needs he hadn't recognized during his years of isolation. Young builders sought his advice on technical challenges, while older riders found inspiration in his demonstration that age didn't necessarily diminish capability or relevance. Steele's garage had become an extension of Morrison and Son, his collection of modern motorcycles, providing laboratory space for experiments that combined traditional techniques with contemporary technology. The collaboration between old-school craftsmanship and new-generation innovation was producing machines that honored motorcycle heritage while embracing future possibilities. Elena's continued coverage of Frank's story had evolved beyond simple documentation toward active participation in preserving motorcycle culture through written and filmed narratives. Her work helped ensure that traditional building knowledge wouldn't be lost as older craftsmen retired and younger enthusiasts pursued different approaches to mechanical expression. Frank's workshop had regained the energy and purpose that had characterized its earlier incarnation, with Sarah's presence felt in every project through the standards of excellence and attention to detail that she had helped establish. The tools that had gathered dust during his period of grief now served new projects that carried forward the legacy they had built together. The annual memorial ride that Frank organized in Sarah's honor had become a significant event in the regional motorcycle calendar, attracting riders who wanted to celebrate both her life and the enduring power of love to transcend death through mechanical passion. The Honda led each year's procession, its distinctive exhaust note serving as mechanical tribute to the woman whose vision had made Frank's recovery possible. David's children, previously distant from their grandfather due to family tensions, had become regular visitors to the workshop, where Frank shared both technical knowledge and family stories that connected them to their heritage. The motorcycle business provided common ground for relationships that had been strained by years of misunderstanding and geographic separation. Frank's final reflection on his journey from isolation to renewal always returned to the moment when Sarah's key had awakened the Honda from its 3-year sleep, transforming both machine and man through the power of love that had survived death to guide the living toward renewed purpose and joy.